The Divine Nine Dragon Cauldron. Chapter 46. When the demon students in the Martial Arts Training Institute found out how Su Yu escaped from Bai Qizhong and bodyguard Chen, Qia Jingyu's reputation would be destroyed instantly. Qia Jingyu was noble and extremely innocent. In order to remain innocent, she would not even allow Fang Qingzhu to touch her, even if she had to commit suicide. Yet she willingly used her jade-like body to hug Su Yu. Senior. Qia. Su Yu was normally as calm as nature. However, his mind turned blank. In his previous life, if he had any misunderstandings with a woman, he could use sweet words to make him happy and use the opportunity to shake him off. However, he could not do that to Qia Jingyu, as she sacrificed her innocence to save him. If he did not have Qin Shiana as his fiancé, he would have been brave and taken responsibility for Qia Jingyu. However, Qin Shiana was already his fiancé. Qin Shiana had lost her father and could not afford to lose her only fiancé. Qia Jingyu wiped her red and swollen eyes. On her snow-like skin, there were still remnants of the last evening light, which was dim like an autumn lotus in a pool during winter, full of charm and cold at the same time. No need to take it to heart. It was just an expedient measure to save Su Yu. Qia Jingyu repeated those lines in her heart, forcing herself to not think of the future. At that moment, footsteps could be heard from the outside. Can father enter? Qia Jingyu's heart suddenly skipped a beat. She looked at Su Yu with a complicated look and said softly and helplessly, "Yes, I have woken up already." What she had to face, she would face eventually. It was impossible for her to hide the fact that Su Yu was in the tent. Qia Lingxuan was worried that his daughter was frightened and went inside the tent in a rush. However, what he saw was a man with a shriveled face, who looked like a beggar, sitting on her daughter's bed. As Qia Jingyu's father, he felt like he had been struck by lightning. Looking at him, he realized the boy was a young man with a very familiar face. Su Yu. Qia Lingxuan was surprised once again. Hadn't he been rescued by Senior Qin and gone somewhere far away from the Fenglan Empire? Why was he there? However, he thought of another question that made him furious. If her daughter was sleeping on the bed naked, did that mean that Su Yu was with her on the bed? His daughter was noble and innocent. Qia Lingxuan strongly believed that she would not do anything that would bring dishonor to her family. Without a doubt, in order to protect Su Yu, Qia Jingyu pretended that she was asleep. However, at that moment, Su Yu was also on the bed, sharing it with her. Qia Lingxuan was extremely shocked. His daughter's innocence. After hearing the commotion, Xuanhuan and a few of the demon students rushed to Qia Jingyu's tent. When they arrived at the scene, they were stunned. Qia Jingyu slept naked with Su Yu. The people outside Qia Jingyu's tent were dumbstruck. Feeling that many unusual eyes were staring at her, Qia Jingyu's face started to turn red. She, who was noble and innocent, could not stand all the unusual eyes staring at her. "All of you are to get out." Qia Lingxuan was startled for some time. His eyes were gloomy like water, as though they were like a volcano that was about to erupt. Xuanhuan immediately led the students away. As he was clever and vigilant, he greatly emphasized to the demon students not to spread the information of Su Yu in the tent. Once Bai Qizhong noticed, he would break his jade pendant, which would cause all of them, including Su Yu, to perish together. However, it would be difficult to keep the secret for too long. Qia Lingxuan's cold eyes were filled with indescribable anger. As he looked at his daughter, he felt that what she did was not worthy. Moreover, he felt pain and anger within his heart. In order to save Su Yu, who she had not known for that long, did she need to sacrifice something so great? Now that everyone knew that his daughter had lost her chastity to Su Yu, even though they had not reached that stage yet, his daughter's good reputation was completely tarnished. What man would marry a lady who had slept naked with another man? When he finally glared at Su Yu, his heart was burning with anger. Even though he was extremely angry, he understood that the matter was not entirely Su Yu's fault. Unless Su Yu had no way out, he would not have escaped into the tent. Suppressing his anger, Qia Lingxuan said with a very low voice, "Su Yu. Tell me, how are you going to settle this issue?" Su Yu took a deep breath and said in an apologetic tone, "I will leave it to Housemaster Qia to decide how to handle this issue." Understood. Qia Lingxuan thought to himself for a short while. Not allowing anyone to interfere, he said, "There is only one way to maintain the good reputation of my daughter, and that is to marry her." Jia Jingyu's heart felt as though it had been struck by lightning. Her face turned red and she disagreed firmly. "No, father." As Su Yu and Jia Jingyu had not known each other for very long, Jia Jingyu did not have many feelings for Su Yu, she only had good impressions of him. She was not prepared to marry Su Yu. HMPH. Do you still have a choice? We will let Su Yu decide for himself. Jia Lingxuan glared at his daughter. He resented her for not bringing credit to herself. If he did not use this opportunity to force Su Yu to marry his daughter, would his daughter have the reputation to be able to marry other men in the future? Of course, with his daughter's exceptional looks, there would be many men laying their eyes on her and it would not be difficult for her to get married. However, if she wanted to marry someone of the same status as her, this matter would be a stain that she could not clean off. Su Yu opened his mouth and apologized harshly. "Housemaster Chia, I cannot agree to your proposal. Xiana is my fiancée and I cannot let her down." Jia Jingyu's heart, which was in high spirits, gradually toned down upon hearing the rejection. She was worried that she would be married to Su Yu in this state of confusion. She did not know why, but after she was rejected, her heart was not as peaceful as she expected. Instead, she felt disappointed. He actually rejected her. It was difficult to ease Jia Lingxuan's rage. His beard and hair started to stand, and while biting his teeth, he uttered every word with a pause in between. "Because of you, my daughter's good reputation is destroyed. If you are not going to marry her, then let me ask you, how are you going to compensate her?" Su Yu was at a loss. After being startled for some time, he paid his respects and said sincerely, "Housemaster Chia and Senior Chia, please give me some time to think. After the holy meet is over and after I settle my marriage matters with Xiana, I will give both of you an explanation." Jia Lingxuan was boiling with rage. This matter could not be dragged on any longer. He couldn't tolerate that once they left, Su Yu decided not to answer for his actions. In the end, his daughter was soft and could not bear to force Su Yu to marry her. She persuaded, "Father, let's settle this matter after Su Yu has settled his marriage matters with Xiana." Jia Lingxuan was extremely furious. Even though he was fighting for his daughter's rights, she went against him. "Su Yu, I will remember this. This matter is not over yet." Jia Lingxuan stormed off. Jia Lingxuan did not understand. The Duke of Xianyu had lost his power and influence, making it almost impossible for Su Yu to achieve anything big in the future. As for his daughter, she possessed good qualities and looks. Moreover, he himself was a martial artist at level 7 and could help Su Yu with his training in the future. Why was Su Yu still so persistent about marrying Qin Xiana? When her father walked far away, Jia Jingyu said softly, "You do not need to take my father's words to heart. I do not need you to take responsibility for me, I only hope that you can take good care of Xiana." Su Yu was moved but ashamed at the same time. "I am indebted to the Duke of Xianyu. Before he died, he entrusted his daughter to me. I cannot abandon Xiana and stop caring about her. After everything is settled, I will give you an explanation." As she listened to Su Yu's difficulties, she realized that it was all because of his gratitude towards the Duke of Xianyu. The disappointment in her heart eased slightly and she started to sympathize with Su Yu. Everyone thought that Su Yu soared to the top with a flap of his wings. Who would have expected him to be caught in the imperial family's fight for power and end up in dire straits? With a leisurely tone, Jia Jingyu said, "You can call me Jingyu. Can you tell me the situation with Xiana?" Su Yu nodded. After 1 hour, Jia Jingyu was both gratified and worried. She was thankful that Qin Xiana was safe and sound, and had escaped to the Fengguang Empire. It was a very strong country, no weaker than the Fengguan Empire. As such, the power of the Fengguan Empire was unable to threaten Xiana. However, she was worried that Su Yu was determined to participate in the holy meet for the sake of revenge. The chances of him getting to first place were slim. Not only that, he might end up in a perilous position. The imperial capital was the first prince's grand territory. After the holy meet had ended and the holy seal in between Su Yu's eyebrows disappeared, there would no longer any obstacles stopping the first prince from killing Su Yu. In a situation where the first prince activated all the strong martial artists in the imperial capital, even if Su Yu had achieved level 9, he would be full of despair. This meant that Su Yu would be fighting with his life on the line. If he could not attain the first position, then the only path remaining for him was death. Su Yu had also gotten a lot of information. He found out that on the day he escaped, the Duke of Xianyu was rescued by the third prince and did not die. However, he had lost one of his arms. That news had caused Su Yu to be over the moon. However, there was another piece of news that caused him to be completely at a loss. In view of the second prince being killed by the traitors, the Duke of Xianyu's charge had been decided. In 10 days' time, he would be executed. According to the time, Su Yu deduced that the 10th day would be the day when the holy meat ended. Su Yu did not have any extra time. That fact had caused Su Yu to be more determined to achieve first place in the holy meat. He had to achieve first position, otherwise the Duke of Xianyu would die. For the remaining days, let me duel with you so that we can learn from one another. I hope that this will help strengthen your abilities. Otherwise, at your current level, the chances of you getting into the top 30 is slim, not to mention first position. Jia Jingyu was moved by Su Yu's persistence and gratitude towards the Duke of Xianyu. Hence, she decided to support him with all her strength. Su Yu lightly shook him head. No. Why? Jia Jingyu lightly bit her lips. Su Yu said calmly, the first prince wants to get rid of me quickly. After I enter the imperial capital, he might send assassins to kill me secretly. If it is revealed that I am among you, he might kill all of you as well in order to cover up the truth. I cannot drag all of you down with me, Su Yu said slowly. The appearance of Bai Qizhong had proven that Su Yu's words were real and not deliberately exaggerated. Even though Jia Jingyu understood, she could not hold her words in anymore and said, then what are you going to do? If we cannot protect you, then who else can? Su Yu was a poor village boy and the most powerful person he knew was the Duke of Xianyu alone. Jia Jingyu could not think of anyone else that Su Yu knew. There is one more person. Su Yu's eyes shone. The next morning, the Martial Arts Training Institute headed towards the imperial capital as if nothing had happened. Su Yu disguised himself as a servant and blended in with the crowd. As for the holy seal in between his eyebrows, he covered it secretly. After many warnings by Chia Lingxuan, the demon students pretended that they did not know a thing and slowly entered the imperial capital. Somewhere far away from the crowd, Bai Qizhong and bodyguard Chen had been secretly observing him for a long time. Bodyguard Chen shook his head gently, seems that he is really not with them. We wasted our night. Bai Qizhong was a bit furious. This crafty kid, seems like he had really escaped. We will return immediately and report back to the first prince. After entering the imperial capital, Su Yu stared at Jia Jingyu with mixed feelings. Jia Jingyu's snow-like eyes were trembling and she was at a loss. Feelings of grief were rolling about in her heart. In order to prevent anyone from noticing, Su Yu and Jia Jingyu did not bid each other farewell with words. Instead, they used their eyes to send each other off. That farewell might be forever. If Su Yu were unable to attain the Holy Crown, then it would be difficult for him to avoid death. Taking advantage of an opportunity when no one was looking, Su Yu entered an alley and disappeared. Jia Jingyu's shoulders were trembling and her heart was full of grief. Why, do you need to torture yourself like this? Jia Lingxuan was a strong martial artist of level 7. As such, how could he not notice that Su Yu had left? He lightly patted her daughter's shoulders and sighed, you could have forced him to stay. Given that he values relationships and gratitude highly, if you had used death to threaten him, he would definitely have compromised and stayed. Jia Jingyu's eyes became complicated. Father, let him go. I do not wish to be like the heaven that binds him. The Divine Nine-Dragon Cauldron. Chapter 47. The 10 demon students were moving towards their destination. The one leading them was an 18-year-old young man who was composed and had a very firm face. The muscles on his body were full of explosive power. As though he felt something, he turned back and managed to capture Su Yu disappearing into the alley. Xiao Li, is he Su Yu, the guy who had been driven away? The firm young man's eyes were filled with extreme anger. Silver-haired Xiao Li felt his anger and instantly knew the reason behind it. The firm young man was furious as his dream lover, Chia Jingyu, sacrificed her innocence in order to save Su Yu. Li had been defeated by Su Yu and he could not bring himself to forget that. As such, at that instant, he decided to embellish the story. HMPH. Yes, that's him. Once he managed to comprehend the holy decree, then he stopped paying attention to all of us. Big brother Zheng, you managed to comprehend the holy decree much earlier than him. What is Su Yu compared to you? He is just a small fry who managed to climb up the ranks from being a good for nothing silver student. He had better not come across me again. The firm young man clenched his fists. As his eyes swept past Chia Jingyu, who had a fairy-like figure, he was unable to stop himself from being infatuated with her. The arrogant and conceited Xiao Li respected and stood behind the man because he was the #1 ranked demon student in the Xianyu Prefecture Training Institute, Zheng Yilan. He was the only demon student who had managed to comprehend the holy decree in the Martial Arts Training Institute. His level of abilities greatly surpassed the rest of the demon students of the same generation, causing him to be unmatched in the training institute. At the holy meet, he had the highest hope of achieving the holy crown. Xiao Li recognized the abilities of Su Yu. However, in front of Zheng Yilan, Su Yu probably could not last beyond his first attack. The third prince was born of a concubine. It was rumored that a few years back, the monarch messed around with his citizens, resulting in the birth of a boy who was later brought back into the imperial palace. It was a pity that in the palace, the third prince did not have any trusted aides. Even though he treated worthy citizens with respect, which gave him a good reputation among the citizens, why was it that he did not have the power to compete with his two older brothers for the throne? Even Duke Xuanhuan, who supported him on the surface, had his whole family beheaded by the third prince's two older brothers for the crime of conspiracy. As of then, there was only a small group of powerful parties who dared to support the third prince. All the ministers and generals, excluding those with moderate views, were all standing on the first prince's side. Having experienced the Duke of Xianyu's punishment, which was an example to others, the ministers and generals with moderate views had started to lean towards the first prince. With that, the first prince was awaiting the death of the monarch. With his death, the first prince would successfully become the Fenglan Empire's new monarch and he would be in control of the big empire from then on. The third prince had no intentions of fighting for the throne. Hence, he lived in the seclusion of the imperial palace to show that he was not seeking fame and wealth. Throughout the year, he quietly trained himself in the prince's palace and kept away from the world's affairs. On that day, a young man quietly stood outside the entrance. He was wearing a plaited bamboo hat and a palm bark rain cape. He had an indescribably handsome face. "Who are you?" The level 4 commander of the entrance guards questioned the young man vigilantly. The young man's deep and starry eyes shone brightly and he said, "The third prince wishes to meet me." He stuck his finger upwards near the middle of his eyebrows. His plaited bamboo hat was lifted up slightly and a holy seal shone for a second. The eyes of the commander of the entrance guards shone brightly and said in a low voice, "Wait here." After drinking a cup of tea, an old man wearing purple clothes came out of the entrance and surveyed Su Yu's whole body with an indifferent look. He stroked his beard, turned around and returned to the palace. Without turning his head back, he said, "Follow me." The old man brought Su Yu deep into the prince's palace immediately. There were birds singing, flowers giving off fragrance, and calmly flowing water. The palace was peaceful with an auspicious atmosphere. There was a magnificent pavilion standing tall and upright in the middle of a pond. Within the pavilion, there was a young man wearing a white shirt with long hair fluttering about randomly. He was holding an ancient book and was flipping through it quietly. He was scholarly and refined, with a peaceful expression. It was the third prince, who did not seek fame and wealth and was living in seclusion of the imperial palace. "Third prince, the person you wanted to meet has arrived." The old man stood with respect. The third prince raised his eyes. Even though his eyes looked dull, they were as deep as the sea and rays of wisdom would flash across them from time to time. "Su Yu, long time no see." The white-shirted young man was indeed the world-famous third prince. A laugh from him was like a breath of fresh air. Su Yu removed his plaited bamboo hat. With his eyes as calm as water, he said, "Third prince. I did not expect you to come to my palace." The third prince smiled indifferently and quietly surveyed Su Yu. Su Yu laughed indifferently. I did not expect you to see me so easily either. The third prince shook his head gently and laughed as usual. However, his tone gradually became cold. You are wrong. I allowed you to enter so that it would be impossible for you to escape. Do it. The third prince suddenly turned hostile. After a short while, 3 shadows who had been hiding for some time appeared from the pond surrounding the pavilion. 2 of them were at level 5 upper tier, while the remaining one was at level 5 peak. The 3 of them were holding a diamond steel net and struck at Su Yu abruptly. Given that they were so close to Su Yu, it was impossible for him to avoid the net. With the net so huge it could cover heaven, the 3 men managed to cover all the clear space around the pavilion, cutting off Su Yu's escape route. The net managed to cover Su Yu's head. At that moment, the 3 strong martial artists at level 5 subdued Su Yu so that he would be unable to move. Su Yu was unable to resist and said coldly, "Third prince, what is the meaning of this?" The third prince had a harsh expression. You have killed my older brother, becoming a criminal to my family. Since you come here on your own accord, how can I not kill you? Take him away. Having walked right into the trap, Su Yu was escorted to the third prince's backyard. The third prince followed in anger so that he could personally interrogate him. The purple-clothed housekeeper's eyes shone as he bowed his head. After escorting Su Yu to the backyard, the level 5 peak commander who was leading the escort could not help but twitch his mouth and look down on Su Yu. I heard that the Duke of Xuanhuan's son-in-law was very powerful and was even able to comprehend the holy decree. I did not expect him to be caught so easily. His name falls short of reality. However, an indifferent laughter could be heard. Lin Xiao, you are wrong. He lives up to his name of being powerful and he deliberately got himself caught by you just now. The level 5 peak commander, Lin Xiao, was shocked. He deliberately got himself caught. As though Su Yu was replying to the indifferent laughter from the back, he shouted with a low voice, Purple Star Thunderbolt. The violent thunder arc contained a breath of extermination. The air contained a burning smell. Both of his fists moved freely, emitting a thunder-like sound. The diamond steel net could not withstand the thunderbolt and was destroyed. The steel net was split open. With a shake of Su Yu's body, he escaped from the 2 hands holding onto his shoulder and managed to escape from the steel net easily. Lin Xiao was shocked. The diamond steel net was extremely hard. If anyone below level 5 got caught in it, they would be unable to escape. Not good. Capture him quickly. Lin Xiao was furious and he took action immediately. Stop. An order by an indifferent voice could be heard from behind Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao looked back, confused. Su Yu turned his body. With a calm expression, he stared at the person behind Lin Xiao and laughed lightly. Seems like I was not wrong. I am indeed the person that the third prince wants to meet. The third prince smiled indifferently, as though his extremely cold expression a few moments ago belonged to another person. His smile felt as though it was a breath of fresh air and the third prince was surprised. How could Brother Su tell that I was putting on a show and pretending to capture you? Su Yu's eyes were clear and deep. The third prince needs me. He purposely captured me for someone else to see. I would guess that someone else is your housekeeper, the purple-clothed old man. The third prince's eyes shrunk and praised Su Yu. On that day at the Duke of Xuanhuan's palace, I felt that you were different from a normal person. I felt that you possessed great wisdom, and after what happened just now, it seems that I was right. That purple-clothed housekeeper of mine had been secretly bribed by the first prince to observe me. If he knew that I received you joyfully, my life would be turned upside down. If I offended you just now, I hope that you could look the other way. The third prince treated Su Yu with modesty. Su Yu's faces was full of admiration for the third prince. He had deduced that the third prince was very calculating and shrewd. After what had just happened, it seemed that Su Yu was right. Even though the third prince knew that the purple-clothed housekeeper had been bribed by the first prince to observe him secretly, he acted ignorant in order to find an opportunity to go against the first prince. He deliberately hid his capabilities and bided his time to confuse the first prince. In reality, he was secretly accumulating power and waiting for an opportunity to compete with the first prince for the throne. Lin Xiao could not believe his eyes. The third prince actually told that secret to Su Yu. Could it be that the third prince had an important role for Su Yu to play? A group of people entered the secret room. Lin Xiao did not move even half a step. He was determined to protect the third prince, and he did so by glaring vigilantly at Su Yu. Brother Su, you took huge risks to look for me. It cannot be just for the sake for an introduction, right? The third prince laughed elegantly. Su Yu drank a mouthful of tea and said, "Didn't I say before that you need me? I am here to help you. What can you help me with?" The third prince laughed indifferently as before. Su Yu's eyes shone. "Of course. To help you fight for the throne." Fight for the throne. 4 words. Su Yu said every word with a pause, making them so powerful they could shake the heavens. The 4 words shook heaven and earth, causing their situation to change. Lin Xiao's expression changed abruptly. A flash of agitation and murderous intent passed across his eyes. "How dare you say these kinds of treasonous words? Kneel down now and allow yourself to be captured." "Stop it!" the third prince shouted. His eyes gradually became narrower and he glared at Su Yu. "What are you saying, Brother Su? I do not understand." Su Yu smiled. "Both you and I understand. Since ancient times, a monarch built his success on the dead bodies of 10,000 soldiers during the fight for imperial power. After the first prince ascends the throne, you will be a big problem to him and he will get rid of you eventually. Given that you are extremely calculating and shrewd, I don't believe that you have not taken any precautions." The third prince stared at Su Yu for some time and laughed loudly. "Ha ha, Su Yu, you are good. I have made a wrong judgment of you. You are smarter than I thought. The Duke of Xianyu really found an impressive son-in-law." At that moment, the group of people gradually stopped laughing. The third prince laughed indifferently. "You are not wrong. I will not go down without a fight. However, what can you do to help me? If I wanted to, you would be unable to exit even half a step out of the prince's palace, not to mention go against my powerful older brother." Su Yu's eyes were unfathomable. With the help of the Holy King, all the imperial power that one possesses is as good as ants. The third prince's thoughts changed and his laughter gradually stiffened. "You wish to participate in the holy meet and attain the first position so that you can get the Holy King to grant you one of your wishes." "That's right," Su Yu said indifferently. "On that day, I swore that if I don't kill the first prince in my lifetime, then I will never be a man. I will achieve the first position in the holy meet and ask for one wish. That is to kill the first prince." Su Yu could not suppress the hatred in his heart. "Once the first prince dies, you will be the only prince left. If you are still unable to ascend to the throne, that means your abilities are questionable and you might as well give up on being the monarch." The people in the secret room were startled. Su Yu actually wanted to attain the first position in the holy meet, even though he knew that his efforts would be in vain. After hearing Su Yu's words, the third prince became silent for a moment. His bright eyes immediately became dim and he felt disappointed instantly. From talking to Su Yu just now, the third prince found out that Su Yu was very experienced at socializing and he had a clear insight of the world's affairs. This had made the third prince feel as though he had met someone who was on intimate terms with him by chance. However, after listening to what Su Yu said, he felt disappointed. Even though Su Yu was intelligent and powerful, he was too conceited. He had aimed very high, but if he fell, he would fall very low. He was arrogant and could not take setbacks. He would not be useful in an important role. At the holy meet, all the Empire's demon students were gathered. Every single one of them was brilliant among their generation. If they were placed anywhere in the Empire, they would be considered geniuses who shook the world. Even though Su Yu was powerful, it would be impossible for him to compete with them. As Lin Xiao could not hold back his laughter anymore, he laughed angrily. "You are arrogant and ignorant. Even I cannot guarantee that I can get into the top 50 in the holy meet. What right do you think you have to get the crown?" Su Yu had a calm expression and he said coldly, "The reason is simple. It is because I am stronger than you." The Divine Nine Dragon Cauldron. Chapter 48. With just you, Lin Xiao laughed angrily. "Then let me give it a try. Let me see how strong the Duke of Xianyu's son-in-law is." Lin Xiao's body turned into a black shadow that was shaped like a cheetah. The cheetah was vigorous, nimble and full of explosive power. Mountain-splitting hammer. Lin Xiao's body moved like a shadow. He clenched both his fists, held them above his head and attacked with a loud crash. A thick layer of green luster covered the whole hammer. The hammer looked as if it fell from the heavens, through vast and boundless deep space. Dim green luster followed behind the hammer and brought out shadow. The sound of sobbing could be heard as it lingered faintly in the air. The strong and powerful air in the atmosphere lifted the black hair hanging in front of Su Yu's forehead, revealing a pair of vast and starry eyes that seemed to shine forever like the stars in the sky. Su Yu revealed a cold expression and his silhouette turned to that of the wind. A moment ago, he was still sitting on the guest seat. The next moment, there was only a fragmentary shadow left. Purple Star Thunderbolt. Ever since he recovered from his injuries and his cultivation base achieved level 4 peak, his vital energy had increased, causing the power of Purple Star Thunderbolt to multiply. It was the same Purple Star Thunderbolt that once had difficulty defeating someone of level 5 peak. As of then, it was more than sufficient to defeat someone of level 5 peak. The thick and violent thunder arc was shining very brightly and sounded like thunder. Bang! Su Yu attacked straight on. A hammer and a punch were rumbling, resulting in the creation of fierce wind and powerful waves. The cold wind was willful and was blowing in all directions. The power of the hammer and punch were frightening. Both of them maintained their initial position when they collided, and none of them were being pushed back. Lin Xiao was surprised. He, who was at level 5 peak, had been successful blocked by Su Yu. The third prince's dim eyes suddenly turned bright. On that day at the Duke of Xianyu's palace, when Su Yu was struck by the level 5 peak first prince's one-shot sure-kill attack, he suffered a fatal injury and almost died. After just a short while, he actually managed to be on par with someone of level 5 peak. Not bad. However, that was still too weak. Lin Xiao gradually withdrew his surprised look. How could he admit defeat in front of the third prince? Triple Earth-splitting pattern. Lin Xiao's momentum changed. Triple Earth-splitting pattern, the top medium-level cultivation technique. At that moment, the hammer descended from heaven, and as if it were a mountain falling from the starry sky, had a power that could smash mountains and rivers into pieces. The thick green luster had the shape of a flame which could burn through heaven. The frightening fist was shaped like a mountain and could extinguish a vast territory. At that moment, Su Yu's expression was as calm as water. The heavenly finger. Facing a strong and oppressive attack, Su Yu raised his finger high up into the sky. At that moment, his whole body was harmonizing with nature. It was as though he had become the person in the painting who had transcended into a greater entity, and did not belong to the human population. He struck his finger downwards. There wasn't any magnificent technique, any brilliance or dazzling posture. There was only an ordinary finger. However, that finger contained indescribable secrets. The pattern of the finger mesmerized the people. Lin Xiao felt an impressive force of nature coming towards him without leaving him an escape route. In the dangerous situation, he switched to defense tactics. He felt severe pain from his arms. The invisible and impressive force had forced him to retreat backwards, causing his back to knock against a stone pillar. He tasted blood in his throat and Lin Xiao's expression changed. He had actually lost to Su Yu's counter-attack. The third prince's eyes were glowing with pride and happiness, so bright that nothing could compare to them. In just 10 days, Su Yu could actually match someone of level 5 peak. Lin Xiao was not satisfied and he made another move. That's it. You cannot win against Su Yu. The third prince gestured in admonition. Lin Xiao was not satisfied with returning back to the third prince's side, which made him uneasy. How was it, third prince? Do I have the rights to participate in the holy meet? The third prince raised his eyes and looked at Su Yu for the first time. Su Yu's deep and profound eyes, persistence and steadfastness had moved him. After muttering to himself for some time, the third prince looked as though he had made his decision and nodded his head. Good. I will make an additional bet on you. Additional. Su Yu looked pensive. I will help you attain the holy crown. If you succeed, you will help me ascend to the throne. The third prince said. Su Yu looked at him and nodded, of course. Lin Xiao, prepare the best training room, the best medicinal materials, the best teacher and the best training partner for Mr. Su immediately. The third prince was bolder than a normal person. He actually agreed to lend Su Yu a helping hand. Moreover, he had also provided Su Yu with the best resources. Bring out all the best resources in the prince's palace. If there are any things that Su Yu wants, you will bring all of them to him. If the prince's palace does not have it, you will go to the market to buy. If the market does not have it, send some men down to look for it in the capital. Do you understand? Lin Xiao was frightened. The third prince was going to entrust all his hope in Su Yu. As the third prince's trusted subordinate, Lin Xiao understood his situation. If he did not become the monarch, he would be killed by the first prince. He could understand if the third prince fought for any rays of hope. However, he could not understand why the third prince placed all his hopes on Su Yu, a young man whom he was not well acquainted with, and who had less than top-notch abilities. After a few hours, Su Yu shut himself out and started to train immediately. Lin Xiao returned back to the third prince's side to report to him after carrying out his tasks. He could not hide his puzzled expression. Master, do you really trust Su Yu that much? Please allow me to tell you the truth. Even though Su Yu's level of ability is above me, saying that he will achieve the crown at the holy meet sounds like an idiot spouting nonsense. Master, for you to put all your hopes on him, isn't it a bit careless? The third prince sighed softly, who said that I had placed all my hopes on him. Lin Xiao did not understand. Master, if so, then what are you trying to achieve by giving him the best resources? Those precious resources can be used to cultivate a few more secret bodyguards, and that is worth more than spending it on Su Yu. After all, spending all those resources on Su Yu is no different from achieving nothing in the end. The third prince laughed indifferently as he recalled his past. In my life, I have seen and met many people. I have many friends, but he is the only one on intimate terms with me. Lin Xiao was relieved. It turned out that the third prince and Su Yu regarded one another highly and treated each other with respect. Both of them were more intelligent than normal people, both of them had lives full of ups and downs, and both of them had reached a point in life where they had to make a huge decision. I do not expect him to repay me in any way. As for those resources, take it as a present from me, someone who is on intimate terms with him. If he attains the crown by luck, then all is good. If he fails to attain the crown, then so be it. For the upcoming holy meet, I have made other preparations, and that is my real chance to turn the tables. The third prince laughed in. After practicing for 10 days, Su Yu exhausted most of his vital energy. Looking at it from another perspective, there was a slight growth in him, and he was close to achieving level 5. The third prince had given Su Yu all his best resources, using all his power to help Su Yu train. Su Yu was close to achieving level 5. Feeling that the vital energy in his body was continuously expanding, Su Yu became very absorbed in his training. With his body shaking, the vital energy in Su Yu's body was at its maximum, as though it was trying to destroy the obstacle between level 4 peak and level 5. Half a day passed. Su Yu felt a noise ringing in his head. Immediately after that, he breathed a peculiar kind of air into his body. His vital energy had doubled. Su Yu had made a breakthrough to level 5 of the martial path. As Su Yu felt the abundance of vital energy of level 5, he found that it was twice as strong as that of a level 4. Su Yu then realized that for him to be able to defeat a level 5 even though he was level 4 was very impressive. If he had another duel with Lin Xiao, he was confident he could achieve a complete victory against Lin Xiao. However, Su Yu understood his situation. His level of abilities were not high enough. In fact, they were far from enough. It was nonsense for him to wish for the first position in the holy meet with his current level of abilities. There were still 3 days remaining before the holy meet, and in those 3 days, he needed to put in all his effort and train crazily. He had 3 objectives in his training. First, Tempest, a middle-level cultivation technique. It was only at stage 3 lower class, and there was still much room for improvement. Second, Purple Star Thunderbolt, a Ascent-level cultivation technique. It was only at entry level and had yet to achieve lower class. With every small bit of progress, its power would increase tremendously. Last, the Holy Decree. He was unable to measure how many layers he had comprehended. However, he would continue to observe its progress like before. With every small bit of the Holy Decree that he managed to comprehend, its power would increase by a layer. For the next 3 days, he would use space-time manipulation, and he would train crazily in a time flow that was 30 times faster than the normal world. With 3 days in the time flow, Su Yu would have a total of 99 days to train, which was equivalent to 3 full months. Time was tight. Suyu closed his eyes and immediately started to train. In the first prince's palace, a pigeon delivered a message. Seeing the letter on the pigeon, the first prince's eyes turned cold and he emitted a deadly intent from his body. On the right side of his face, there was a long and hideous scar which looked like a centipede. He wore an eye patch on his right eye, and he had also become more cruel and ruthless compared to in the past. Good job, younger brother. Suyu is actually in your hands. The first prince clenched his fist and was full of hatred. The death of the second prince and the pain from his disfigured face was deeply engraved into the first prince's heart and would not dissipate easily. As long as Suyu was alive, he would continue to feel uneasy. However, Suyu had entered the third prince's palace, making it impossible for the first prince to assassinate him. There were strong martial artists in the third prince's palace. Secretly assassinating Suyu sounded like a whimsical story. If he was discovered and if the third prince used the opportunity to expose his plot to the whole world, then the sanctuary might send someone to kill him immediately. Before the holy meet ended, he could not make any reckless moves. By Qizhong, dispatch an order down to the imperial capital's guards. Tell them to monitor the city strictly. After the holy meet, the whole city should keep a lookout for Suyu. Once he is found, kill him on the spot. The first prince dispatched the order coldly. After the holy meet had ended and the holy seal had disappeared, he would kill Suyu in front of the audience as there would not be any risks. Bai Qizhong's body was filled with cold sweat. Suyu had actually slipped into the imperial capital right under his eyes. Understood. I will do it immediately. Bai Qizhong turned around hurriedly as he wanted to redeem himself for his mistake. Wait a moment. The first prince's face turned gloomy. Because of your incompetence, I might be exposed. Now, I will entrust one task to you. Bai Qizhong kneeled down with agitation. I did not manage to fulfill the previous task, please punish me. There is no need for me to punish you as I had used you to help me kill Suyu. There will be opportunities for you to redeem yourself in the future. Now, I want you to fulfill a task. The first prince said coldly, the task is to kill bodyguard Chen, whom you had worked with. When Bai Qizhong and bodyguard Chen worked together to catch Suyu, bodyguard Chen had seen Bai Qizhong's true colors, and he knew that Bai Qizhong was the first prince's subordinate. Yet, Suyu was still alive. As a precaution, bodyguard Chen must be killed so that all the evidence could be destroyed. Understood. Bai Qizhong wiped off his cold sweat. One more thing. Suddenly, the first prince said enigmatically, how is the progress on the cultivation technique I gave you going? Bai Qizhong shivered with fear, took out a scroll and gave it to the first prince with both his hands. First prince, this is the most recent comprehension, please take a look. The first prince took the scroll. As he looked at the scroll, his eyes were burning brilliantly. Not bad. This is quite well done. Remember, do not spread the cultivation technique that you have seen before. Bai Qizhong bowed his head and took his leave quickly. After Bai Qizhong left, the first prince's eyes gradually turned cold. Master, the first prince shouted lightly and bowed. A red-robed old man with deep eyes descended from the rooftop as though he was a ghost. He was the first prince's martial path master, a frightening martial artist who was at level 7 peak of the martial path. The first prince handed the scroll over to the red-robed old man. The old man took a look at the scroll, which was Bai Qizhong's comprehension of floating light shadow. His deep eyes shone brilliantly and he laughed with a satisfied look. Not bad. This is indeed the last part of the comprehension of floating light shadow, as expected of the holy talent who attained position 11 in the holy meet 50 years ago. He had actually managed to comprehend the level cultivation technique kept by the imperial family to this level. The first prince laughed coldly. Bai Qizhong might not know yet. The cultivation technique that I passed him is the cultivation technique that had been handed down through the imperial family, the level cultivation technique floating light shadow. It is only possible for a holy genius like him, who attained position 11 in the holy meet, to comprehend it. The Divine Nine Dragon Cauldron. Chapter 49. For 100 years, no one had been able to comprehend floating light shadow because it required a high level of comprehension. No one in the world, apart from the 10 holy talents who had extremely high levels of comprehension, were able to comprehend floating light shadow. The first prince wanted to borrow the abilities of the 10 holy talents to help him comprehend the technique so that he could cultivate it, since it had been lost for years. However, every batch of the top 10 holy talents were invited to the sanctuary, causing all of them to be beyond the first prince's reach. Bai Qizhong was the only exception. As the holy meat participant who had attained the 11th position, he was the only person, apart from the top 10 holy talents, who had the highest possibility of comprehending the Ascent-level cultivation technique, and he was able to do so. Master, is it possible for me to successfully learn this cultivation technique using this comprehension? The first prince's eyes were burning with excitement. The red-robed old man shook his head lightly. It is still not enough. After all, Bai Qizhong is not a real sanctuary disciple and lacks a certain level of comprehension. His comprehension of floating light shadow is not perfect and he is a step away from successfully cultivating this technique. I will go back and refine his comprehension, so that you can understand it easily and successfully master this cultivation technique. Thank you, Master. The first prince was excited, however his eyes immediately turned cold. After this, Bai Qizhong would become useless. Since he has seen the Ascent-level cultivation technique that has been passed down in the royal family for generations, and he tried to assassinate a holy seal bearer, it is about time for me to kill him. The red-robed old man laughed sinisterly. Leave this matter to me. A pawn like Bai Qizhong must be killed when the time is right. 3 days passed. The Martial Path Grand Event, the Holy Meet, which was held once every year in the Fenglan Empire, was about to begin. Strong martial artists, as well as people from all over the world, gathered to watch this grand event in the empire. Under the current peaceful and flourishing atmosphere, they moved towards the event hall slowly. At the third prince's palace, the ambience was becoming increasingly nervous. At nightfall, in the pavilion, the third prince felt uneasy and he continued pacing back and forth as he read his book. Master, the royal family's dragons meeting is about to begin. We cannot wait for Su Yu any longer, Lin Xiao said, as he could tell that the third prince was feeling uneasy. The third prince put down his book and lightly shook his head. Don't worry, there is still time. Suddenly, wind started to blow in the courtyard. A purple-shirted figure, who had the shadows of white clouds, appeared calmly in front of the pavilion. His face was as handsome, he was glowing with pride and with an indescribable charm. He had a pair of deep eyes which pierced all creations on earth. He had black hair that flowed like a waterfall, hanging naturally behind his back. He wore a comfortable purple shirt that was lightly blown by the wind. The third prince wore a smile as he walked towards him and cupped his fists. Congratulations, Brother Su. Your expression and abilities are incomparable to the past. Third prince, thank you for your help. Su Yu clasped his hands in gratitude. Lin Xiao looked displeased. He felt that it was not worth it for the third prince since he had wasted his resources. With his normal tone, he said, Su Yu, I hope you live up to the third prince's kindness. Su Yu's eyes shone and he looked at Lin Xiao. Brother Lin, I know that on that day you were not satisfied when you were unable to match up to me. How about we have another battle right now? Lin Xiao's eyebrows twitched a little. He felt that if he was more vigilant, he might not have lost to Su Yu. Therefore, he had been thinking about a rematch for a long time. Lin Xiao raised his eyes and looked at the third prince. The third prince muttered to himself for some time and nodded his head. He wanted to know why Su Yu was so confident. Of course, the third prince did not believe that in a mere 3 days, Su Yu's abilities would increase exponentially. He only felt that Su Yu's physical strength and injuries had recovered and that Su Yu was very full of confidence. With the third prince's approval, Lin Xiao was delighted. He was confident that he would not lose. It would be impolite for me to decline this duel. Lin Xiao stepped forward, raised his hands and uttered, mountain-splitting hammer. That hammer looked as though it came from heaven, with a frightening power just like in the past. Su Yu's expression was as calm as a sunny day. Tempest. Su Yu lifted his leg and gave a kick. With his kick, cold winds started to form, snow and ice started to fall. It was as if an ice dragon had entered the world. He had entered the world of snow and ice, made an army out of the cold wind, and caused everything to freeze. Lin Xiao gave a blood-curdling scream and retreated about 7 to 8 meters away. The thick and cold ice had condensed on his fists, causing him to freeze. His body was surrounded by a cold mist as though he had just walked out from a winter world, causing his whole body to shiver. Lin Xiao gasped with astonishment. The power of a stage 3 upper-class medium-level cultivation technique. The third prince's expression changed. 3 days ago, Su Yu's tempest was at stage 3 lower class. However, in a mere 3 days, it had actually gone up by a class. The third prince's eyes were filled with astonishment. Looking back at Su Yu, he had not moved the slightest bit from his original position and he leisurely withdrew his leg. He had managed to achieve stage 3 upper class for Tempest. As such, he was only 1 step away from achieving top class. Lin Xiao was astonished. However, he was dissatisfied. How could he admit defeat so easily? The vital energy in his body started to vibrate, causing the cold mist to evaporate. He closed the distance between Su Yu and himself, and roared, triple earth-splitting pattern. A green flame swept across the sky with a frightening power that could burn through the heavens and destroy the mountains and rivers, heading towards Su Yu. The strong energy of the attack had caused the wind to flutter against Su Yu's shirt. However, the wind was unable to disrupt his eyes, which were as calm as an autumn lake. Purple Star Thunderbolt. Su Yu counter-attacked leisurely. A layer of refined thunderbolt wrapped around his fists as if there were multiple thunderstrikes, and they emitted powerful rays of light. When the fists collided, triple earth-splitting pattern dissipated in an instant. Blood started to overflow from Lin Xiao's mouth. His body ignored his orders and he was sent flying about 10 meters. Lin Xiao's organs took a huge blow, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. He had suffered a minor injury. As though he was in a fantasy, Lin Xiao was extremely astonished. Comparing that same purple star thunderbolt 3 days ago and to this one, its power did not just go up by a level. In fact, it seemed twice as powerful. As Lin Xiao pulled himself up, his eyes were full of astonishment. This time around, he was completely convinced. Thank you, Mr. Su, for showing mercy. The third prince's eyes shone brilliantly. Su Yu actually held back. If Su Yu did not hold back, would that fist have killed Lin Xiao on the spot? Su Yu had only spent 3 days training and had managed to become so strong, from being on par with a level 5 peak, to being able to easily kill one. How did Su Yu's abilities increase so much in a mere 3 days? The third prince combined the rumors that he had gotten from the Xuanhuan prefecture regarding Su Yu. A few months ago, Su Yu was just a normal silver student. However, as though he had risen like a comet, he cut open time and space, achieving the title of the Silver King with his abilities and suppressing 2 generations of Gold Kings. In no time, he defeated a demon student, making a name for himself as well as making the Martial Arts Training Institute a laughing stock. Su Yu's potential was rarely seen in one's life. If he were given more time, he would become a strong martial artist who was unmatched. The third prince felt that it was a pity. He then sighed depressingly, how good will it be if I could give you another 3 years' time to train? In 3 years' time, it would be difficult to ascertain how much Su Yu would grown. However, if he was still on the side of the third prince and went against the first prince, there would be higher chances of him being victorious against him. However, it is a pity that time and tide wait for no man. The Su Yu in his current state would not be of much help to the third prince. Brother Su, the holy meet is tomorrow. Is there anything else that you need? The third prince smiled. Before the catastrophe came, he was willing to do everything he could to help this demon student whom he was on intimate terms with. Su Yu pondered for some time, and lightly shook his head, resources are temporarily useless to me. What I need now is comprehension for when I am fighting. Within 3 days, he had digested uncountable amounts of universe's miracle mineral plant, causing his blood vessels to be full of energy. The continual usage of resources would be useless as his abilities would not be strengthened by them. By experiencing more actual combat, his level of comprehension would increase, causing his body to be strengthened further. Unable to help Su Yu, the third prince sighed. As he raised his head and looked at the sky, his expression gradually became serious. Su Yu, it is time for us to meet up with them. Them. Su Yu was confused. Surprised, the third prince said, can it be that the Duke of Xuanhuan did not tell you about it? When the third prince recalled the time when the Duke of Xuanhuan bestowed the holy order upon Su Yu before his death, he felt relieved as his doubts were cleared up. In that situation, the Duke of Xianyu must not have had the time to tell Su Yu. There are two kinds of people participating in the holy meet held by the Empire. The first kind of people are the students from the Martial Arts Training Institute. The Training Institute had scouted for all the geniuses in the Empire, and they are the key figures in the holy meet. The second kind of people represent the royal family in the holy meet. For example, you represent the Xianyu prefecture. Every duke from the 12 other prefectures can recommend one person to take part in the holy meet. Aside from you, there are 12 other representatives from the 12 other prefectures. Moreover, in the royal family, each of the 3 princes can also recommend one person to participate in the holy meet. Including you, there are a total of 16 representatives from the royal family. Over the years, on the day before the holy meet, the 16 representatives would gather once and hold the royal family's dragons meeting. During the meeting, the representatives would have friendly duels and learn from one another. Understanding your own level of abilities before the holy meet is extremely useful, so it is important for all of the 16 representatives to attend the meeting, the first prince explained patiently. Su Yu pondered for a moment and his eyes shone. Will the first prince be spectating? The third prince knew what Su Yu was thinking and nodded his head. The recommenders of the 16 representatives will be there as well. Big Brother and I will be spectating and you will be able to see him then. But, the third prince reminded, if you want to kill him on the spot and perish with him, I would advise you not to do it. You already revealed Diabolic Sword, the secret technique of the soul, to him before. Big Brother would definitely take precautions against it, and it would be almost impossible for you to kill him from another dimension. Su Yu had thought of that idea before. However, with the third prince's confirmation, he could only give up on the method of perishing together with the first prince disappointedly. Then, let's go. Su Yu's eyes turned cold. Ultimately, the only way for him to take his revenge was to attain the holy crown. Please wait for a moment. The person that I have recommended is still on his way. The third prince's eyes shone brilliantly. Each of the 3 princes could recommend a person for the holy meet. As such, the third prince was no exception. Su Yu did not feel strange at all. He had thought of using the holy meet as an opportunity to turn the tables against the first prince. As a calculating and shrewd person, it was impossible for the third prince not to have thoughts of that as well. Naturally, he had also arranged for someone trustworthy to take part in the holy meet. A few days ago, the third prince had said it was an additional bet. As of then, Su Yu understood its meaning. Behind the third prince, he had another strong martial artist. After waiting for half an hour, a young man, who walked like the wind, arrived with striding steps. He was about 16 years old and he wore a blue-colored robe. His figure was average and he looked normal. He had an ordinary expression and his eyes looked indifferent, as though he disregarded all creations on earth, giving off a cold and solitary feeling as a result. In his eyes, he treated Su Yu and Lin Xiao as though they did not exist, so that he would not be distracted. It was only until he was before the third prince that he knelt down. Third prince, we can leave now. Su Yu frowned. Rather than thinking that the young man was cold and solitary, Su Yu felt that the young man gave off an air of arrogance. Other than the third prince, who caused him to lower his head willingly, he did not pay attention to anyone else. The third prince said calmly, Dong Lin, please stand up. Dong Lin stood up extremely straight in his position. In his eyes, there was only the third prince alone, not Su Yu and Lin Xiao. Needless to say, he definitely had the abilities to be arrogant. Even though he was 16 years old, his abilities were at level 6 lower tier of the martial path. With his unbelievable talent, he was worthy of being called frightening. In the Martial Arts Training Institute, as far as what Su Yu knew, there was only one person who had achieved level 6 of the martial path. That person was the top demon student, Zheng Yilan. Not only had he managed to comprehend the holy decree, he had also managed to train until he achieved level 6 lower tier of the martial path. He was a frightening demon student with a chance of getting into the top 10 in the holy meet. Dong Lin, who was in front of his eyes, was comparable to Zheng Yilan. The Divine Nine Dragon Cauldron. Chapter 50. Since everyone has arrived, let's go. The third prince nodded his head. When he looked at Dong Lin, his eyes were filled with expectations and hope. Having felt the third prince's attitude, Su Yu understood the third prince had not placed his hopes in him. However, Su Yu did not have any objections. The third prince had given Su Yu precious resources and had kept him safe, but he wished for Su Yu to repay him. But Su Yu's gratitude was insufficient to repay the third prince. Why would he bear hatred towards the third prince? The royal family's dragons meeting was held in the Holy Arena. The Holy Arena was built by the Empire solely for the Holy Meet. The construction cost hundreds of millions and it allowed 10,000 people to view the battle. Normally, the Holy Arena would be closed to the public and there would be strict security. There would be a large number of soldiers stationed outside as guards, not allowing anyone to take a single step inside. It was only that night, when the royal family held the dragons meeting, that the Holy Arena would be open for a short while, allowing members of the royal family to enter so that the 16 representatives could duel and learn from one another. That day, the 16 demon students who had been recommended by the royal family met one another under the moonlight. Of the 13 dukes, Duke Xuanhuan's whole family had been beheaded and the Duke of Xuanhuan had been thrown into Heaven's prison, causing both of them to be absent from the meeting. Of the princes, the second prince had been killed by Su Yu. Other than that, everyone else was at the Holy Arena. Su Yu. The first prince's eyes shrunk. He did not expect Su Yu to be there. The first prince knew that Su Yu had slipped into the imperial city quietly. He did not expect Su Yu to actually participate in the Holy Meet. Could it be that he wanted to use the Holy Meet as an opportunity to regain his former glory? If Su Yu managed to get into the top 10 and become a sanctuary disciple, he would make a name for himself. When he returned, destroying the first prince would be as easy turning his overhand. However, when the first prince thought of Su Yu's abilities, he shook his head and laughed. There was no chance for Su Yu would get into the top 10. The number of demon students at the Holy Meet was comparable to the clouds in the sky. Even though Su Yu was strong, it would be difficult for him to compete with them, unless it was in a few years. However, the first prince would not give Su Yu that much time. When the Holy Meet ended, he would pay any price to exterminate Su Yu, who he believed was a great hazard. Hearing the voice of the first prince, Su Yu looked in his direction. Without hiding his murderous intentions, he said coldly, "First prince, I have said before, if I don't kill you, I will never be a man. The heaven, earth, sun and moon shall be the witness to my oath." The first prince's eyelids started to twitch, and his deadly intent became stronger. If Su Yu did not die, he would continue to feel uneasy. These words shook the hearts of the people who heard them. They had also caused the happy atmosphere to come to a standstill. The audience who knew about the hatred between Su Yu and the royal family watched with cold eyes. "You overestimate yourself." The first prince tilted his body and looked at the young man. The young man held a sword, had short hair and looked at Su Yu coldly with his sharp eyes. He gave off a very powerful vibe that could cause the mountains to rumble and create very powerful waves in the sea. Su Yu's whole body was under a very heavy pressure, as though he was being crushed by a mountain, causing him to breathe heavily. HMPH. Su Yu hummed coldly. He jolted the vital energy in his body, emitting a powerful vibe to rival the young man's, causing him to cancel each other out in an instant. "Watch your words." The short-haired young man hummed with disdain. The first prince gave a bitter expression. "Enough. Du Yuntian, why are you arguing with this kind of person, who do not know what he is saying?" The indifferent eyes of Donglin were filled with a rare fear. Level 6 upper tier. The third prince's pupils shrunk. The first prince had actually managed to nurture someone to level 6 upper tier like Du Yuntian. Donglin, if you were to fight him, what would your chances of winning be? The third prince's heart was shaking as he felt a bad premonition. One careless move and the whole game was lost. If Du Yuntian managed to defeat Donglin and the first prince ascended the throne, there would be no more chances for the third prince to rise to the top. Moreover, it is also possible that the third prince would suffer the same fate as the Duke of Xuanhuan, whereby he would be accused of treason, put in chains and thrown into the prison. Donglin's eyes were full of fighting spirit. He is very strong. However, if I display my full power, I might have a chance against him. Did that mean there was still a ray of hope for victory? The third prince's heart quietly felt at ease. The whole group of spectators sat down. In the big holy arena, there were only a few of them, causing the arena to be very open and spacious. At the same time, it was filled with a very cold atmosphere. To all the geniuses recommended by the royal family, tomorrow all of you will represent the royal family and duel with the 13 martial arts training institutes, achieving glory for the royal family. Tonight, all of you will duel and learn from one another, and this will be your warm-up for tomorrow's duel. The first prince portrayed himself as a normal spectator. He did not feel in the slightest bit that under the moonlight, the hideous scar on the right side of his face would be so gruesome and frightening. Du Yuntian carried a sword while he was standing. With sharp eyes, he glanced at the other 15 geniuses. When his eyes swept across Su Yu, he stopped for a moment. However, as though he was scratching the surface, his eyes swept past him after a prolonged glance. After looking at everyone, Du Yuntian shook his head coldly and withdrew from the arena. I will not be participating. The first prince laughed. Du Yuntian, why don't you have a friendly duel with them? There is no one here that is worthy of my blade. I am not interested. His arrogant speech left the remaining 15 geniuses enraged. However, the 15 geniuses could not be disappointed. As Du Yuntian was at level 6 upper tier, there were very few of them who were worthy to be his opponent. The only person which could be his opponent was the young genius recommended by the third prince, Dong Lin. However, from Du Yuntian's tone, Dong Lin was also not worthy of being his opponent. Dong Lin was full of pride. His eyes shone brilliantly, showing his desire to have a match with Du Yuntian. However, he got the hint from the third prince not to be forceful in trying to prove his abilities by defeating him, so that he could save his energy for the next day. The third prince's plan was that since Du Yuntian was arrogant and paid no attention to the rest of them, he would allow him to continue with his attitude. In the meantime, Dong Lin would save his energy and give Du Yuntian a surprise during the holy meet the next day. Unable to suppress his dissatisfaction and anger, Dong Lin picked a person to duel with. That person he picked was a strong martial artist of level 5 peak who came from the Qingshan prefecture after he was selected by his duke. I am Zhang Ling. May I ask for your name? Zhang Ling was content and free of fear. He leaped into the arena delicately. Dong Lin was arrogant and cold. Cut the crap. I will let you make the first move, come at me. Zhang Ling's face became serious. Aren't you a bit too arrogant? The Qingshan prefecture was vast and boundless. For Zhang Lin to be chosen from the millions of geniuses, how strong was he? However, when he came to the royal family's dragons meeting, he was actually treated with disdain. Dong Lin stood still for some time, with a cold and arrogant expression. He paid no attention to Zhang Ling, as though he had not realized Zhang Ling's existence. You look down on me too much. Zhang Ling launched an attack furiously. City demolishing raging flame. Zhang Ling emitted a Vita energy which surrounded his body, as though it was a layer of raging flames burning vigorously. Waves of flames started to disperse in all directions. The spectators at the grandstand could feel the flames heat from their seats. What an amazing cultivation technique. It should be a top medium level cultivation technique that has achieved stage 2 top class. Only a step away from stage 3, the highest stage of the cultivation technique. The raging flames wrapped around his body, with a heat so strong that they could burn through heaven. A very strong power could be felt in all directions. With a raging flame that could demolish a city, Zhang Ling headed towards Dong Lin. Covered in majestic flames, it was as though Zhang Ling wanted to burn Dong Lin to ashes. However, Dong Lin stood absolutely still, with his eyes unchanged, and still paid no attention to him. Nothing special. Dong Ling raised his hands and swung them violently. The raging flames surrounding Zhang Ling were fully extinguished with one swing. The fierce city-demolishing raging flame was easily pulverized by Dong Lin. Zhang Ling's expression changed abruptly. His strongest attack was actually pulverized so easily. Dong Lin was absolutely still. His eyes were shining brilliantly and were full of coldness at the same time. I have allowed you to make your move. It is now my turn. Hibernation destroying finger. Dong Lin stretched out his index finger abruptly. It was as if the sun had just risen from the east, and as if the world had become one with it. Layers and layers of raging flames covered his finger. The finger had a powerful vibe that shook the air, and fragmentary shadows of the flames piled up layer upon layer. Zhang Ling's expression turned pale as he was gradually filled with fear. City demolishing raging flame. In the dangerous situation, Zhang Ling used his unique skill again. Zhang Ling gave a horrible shriek and was sent flying for 20 meters, causing him to fall below the arena and spit out a mouthful of blood. Medium-level cultivation technique at Stage 3 top class. Su Yu's pupils shrunk. The first prince's expression turned grave. Dong Lin had actually honed his medium cultivation technique to Stage 3 top class. Only Du Yuntian paid no attention to it and he commented coldly. Zhang Ling has very strong fundamentals, with very thick vital energy and powerful cultivation techniques. As for cons, his execution of techniques is not smooth, and he has slow reaction time and weak willpower. Hence, he has a lot of weak points. Dong Lin has a very high cultivation base. His cultivation technique is at Stage 3 top class and he executes it smoothly. As for cons, he is weak at controlling his vital energy, causing him to waste much of it. If he continues to fight for a prolonged period of time, he will be at a disadvantage. Du Yuntian's words had hit the mark, dealing psychological damage to Zhang Ling as a result. As for Dong Lin, his eyes were cold. HMPH. Did I ask for your comment? As he glanced at the remaining 13 geniuses, Dong Lin retired from the arena. I will excuse myself as well. The rest of you are too weak and are of no interest to me. The remaining 13 geniuses' faces were burning with anger. In their prefectures, they were considered geniuses that could only be found once in 100 years. However, at the arena, they were continuously treated with disdain. They were extremely disappointed. However, upon witnessing Zhang Ling's sorry state, they knew that they were below Du Yuntian and Dong Lin and could only contain the dissatisfaction within their hearts. After the two of them retired from the arena, there was an awkward silence. The first prince looked around and laughed. Zhan Li, haven't you been yearning for a match with the Duke of Xianyu's son-in-law? Why not have a match against him now? The audience looked towards Zhan Li. He was a genius at level 5 peak, and his abilities were about the same as Zhang Ling's. A few people felt strange. Zhan Li was a genius recommended by the second prince, however, the second prince was killed by Su Yu. Zhan Li was 17 years old. He was thin and small, with a rough face and a violent personality. There was a cruel and ruthless vibe surrounding his body. He looked at Su Yu coldly, causing him to feel that he was being watched by a wild beast. Su Yu. Zhan Li bit his teeth and blurted out Su Yu's name. His voice was full of hatred. Zhan Li took big steps and went up to the arena. He looked down from the arena and pointed his fingers at Su Yu's nose. Get down now. Originally, he should have been enjoying untold wealth and high honor while he was at the second prince's service. That would have allowed him to soar to the top with a flap of his wings, causing him to be standing above millions of people. However, the death of the second prince had caused the future that he had foreseen to be completely destroyed. Among the spectators, he was known to have almost as much hatred towards Su Yu as the first prince. I will grant you your wish. Su Yu leapt onto the arena and confronted him coldly. Zhan Li was full of hatred and he launched an attack angrily. Iron Horse Kick. It was a medium-level cultivation technique that was at Stage 3 lower class. He raised his leg and as if there were thousands of men riding horses, the dust lifted off the ground continuously. The spectators' inner strength was boiling with excitement, their hearts beating violently, as they could feel the strong pressure in the arena. As Zhan Li came closer, Su Yu felt even more pressure. Zhang Ling, who was beneath the arena, had a fearful expression, but he was amazed. As expected of the genius recommended by the second prince, he actually managed to comprehend his medium-level cultivation technique to Stage 3 lower class. When he put himself in Su Yu's shoes, he was filled with cold sweat and his air of arrogance was greatly reduced in an instant. He found out that if his opponent was Zhan Li, he would not be able to last against more than 10 moves of his. It was difficult to comprehend a medium-level cultivation technique. However, the increase in power between every class was huge. At the Qingshan prefecture, Zhang Ling treated other geniuses with disdain. However, at the Dragon's meeting, he felt that he was inferior to many others. At the Holy Meet, the number of demon students was comparable to the number of clouds. Among the demon students, he was considered below average. Zhan Li took vigorous strides. His leg technique was like millions of horses galloping, causing the spectators to shake with fear. There was a red light surrounding his leg. As he galloped, his legs were like a big volcano ready to erupt. In primeval state, Zhang Li violently threw himself at Su Yu. Kneel down now. Zhang Li's big strides were like thunderbolts. He aimed for Su Yu's chest. The wind blew away the black hair in front of Su Yu's forehead. The sand covered Su Yu's icy cold eyes. Su Yu started to move.